In the grand unfolding of lifetimes, there comes a moment when the soul begins to close the circle. According to spiritual guide Estella Ford, certain signs appear only in your final incarnation, when the journey through birth, death, and rebirth nears completion. This isn't about endings. It's about the final integration of wisdom, the quiet merging of all that's been learned. If you're seeing these signs, it could mean your soul has reached the summit of its earth experience. In this video, we'll uncover those rare indicators that whisper, not shout, that you may be living your very last life. The final life feels strangely familiar from the start. Some lives feel new, clumsy, reactive, uncertain. But if this is your last, the world may seem eerily familiar, even as a child. You might feel like you've been here before, not just in vague memories, but in the way your soul instinctively recognizes pain, love, joy, and truth. You walk into places and feel déjà vu, meet people and sense timelines folding. This is not imagination. It's resonance. There's a quiet knowing within you. You don't panic in chaos the way others do. You don't over-celebrate success. Instead, you experience life with a steady internal rhythm, as if you've already danced to this song many times before. That rhythm is the mark of a soul that no longer reacts to the temporary, but instead leans into the eternal. Relationships feel different too. Some feel like completions rather than beginnings. You meet someone and immediately understand your work with them is old, unfinished. Others come and go without emotional drama, because your soul no longer clings to what must pass. The emotional code of final life souls is gentle release, not grasping. Even your struggles come with strange clarity. When pain arrives, a part of you watches quietly, almost as if remembering the last time you faced a similar test in a different body. You begin to see the lesson within the moment while you're still inside it, not years later. That's spiritual maturity cultivated across lifetimes. The dreams you have often seem layered, real but not quite from this world. You may see faces you don't know in waking life, but feel deep familiarity with. These are fragments of the long path your soul has walked. In your sleep, the veil lifts, and the many lives within you brush against your awareness. When this life begins to feel like a quiet summary of everything you've been through before, it's not just nostalgia. It's the closing alum novel. Each page echoes the themes you've already explored, and now you are writing the final chapter with greater presence than ever before. You carry wisdom you never studied. Some people seek knowledge. Others simply radiate it. If you're in your final life cycle, you may notice you carry deep understanding without having studied it. Insight flows through you, not from effort, but from inner remembrance. It's not about being intellectual. It's about your soul speaking fluently in the language of truth. This wisdom shows up in unexpected moments. You find yourself offering guidance that surprises even you. It doesn't come from books. It comes from a place beyond memory. A place where your previous lives have carved rivers of truth that now flow through you with grace and calm conviction. People often ask how you know what you know, and you don't have an answer. There's no course you can point to, no mentor to credit. That's because the wisdom didn't come from this life. It was earned across lifetimes, through trials, heartbreaks, choices, and awakenings you've long since processed. This depth of knowing brings quiet confidence. You don't need to argue or prove yourself. When someone disagrees, you feel no urgency to convince. Because you've learned, through experience, that truth reveals itself in time, and your peace is no longer dependent on being understood. You may also be deeply intuitive, sensing what's beneath the surface without trying. Your instincts are accurate because they're not new. They are ancient. This intuitive wisdom doesn't shout. It simply knows, and it doesn't need recognition. It finds its power in stillness, not performance. The moment you realize your wisdom didn't begin with you, but flows through you, is the moment your soul starts showing you how close it is to completion. You've moved beyond gathering knowledge. Now you're living in a stream of spiritual integration. Karma doesn't repeat, it resolves around you. Most souls repeat karmic lessons through patterns and people that return again and again. But when you're in your final life, those patterns begin to resolve, not because they vanish, but because you no longer react the same way. You don't feed the loop, you dissolve it through conscious presence. You might notice that people who once triggered you no longer affect you the same way. Their energy doesn't stick. Your responses soften. This isn't passivity, it's evolution. You're no longer caught in karmic charge. You're observing it from a higher vantage point, completing the lesson without entanglement. Situations that used to challenge you deeply may still arise, but your inner relationship with them has changed. You approach them not as problems, but as mirrors, each one offering closure instead of conflict. This shift signals that karmic cycles are no longer in motion. They're in completion. You may also sense that long-held ancestral or family burdens begin to fall away. Not because those dynamics have changed, but because you no longer carry them. You've stopped absorbing what was never yours to hold. That's a mark of a soul finishing its assignment, not continuing its test. Final life souls don't break karma through dramatic events. They dissolve it through stillness, forgiveness, and disengagement from old emotional fuel. This doesn't make you disconnected. It makes you free. You no longer need karma to evolve. You're already living from its wisdom. As karma unwinds around you, you begin to feel something profound. Peace not based on circumstance, but on sovereignty. That peace becomes your new teacher, and it teaches you that your soul is no longer looping. It's lifting. We're drawn to solitude over society. In earlier lives, the soul often seeks stimulation, new people, new experiences, new roles to play. But as it nears its final incarnation, the pull reverses. You no longer crave the crowd. You long for silence. You feel closer to yourself when you are alone than when you are surrounded by others. This isn't isolation out of fear. It's solitude born of alignment. You feel more at home in the forest, by the ocean, or in your own breath than you do in noisy rooms. That quiet is sacred now. It's not a withdrawal. It's an invitation into death. You may still love people, but you no longer need their energy to feel whole. Your friendships become fewer, but more intentional. Conversations go deeper. Small talk feels draining. This isn't elitism. It's energetic precision. You're conserving frequency for truth, not distraction. Solitude also sharpens your sensitivity. You begin to notice how environments affect your nervous system, how certain energies cling while others expand you. That awareness helps you stay clear. In the past, you might have absorbed everything. Now you choose what you engage with. There's also a calling in solitude, not the kind that waits passively, but the kind that creates space for your higher self to take full form. In that space, you begin to hear guidance you once drowned out in noise. You stop trying to find yourself. You remember yourself. This shift towards solitude doesn't make you separate. It makes you whole. And in that wholeness, your soul begins to breathe differently, like a traveler who knows it's almost home and wants to walk the final stretch in stillness and grace. Estella Ford on soul completion and inner stillness. Estella often teaches that a soul nearing its final life will stop reaching outward and begin settling inward. There's a calmness in these souls, a stillness that doesn't require answers, applause, or achievement. This stillness is not emptiness. It's saturation. The soul has become full. This inner quiet is not disengagement, it's presence. You begin to feel life more intimately, but react to it less dramatically. You're no longer driven by highs and lows. You're anchored, not in indifference, but in clarity. The pendulum of duality slows, and you begin to walk the middle path with peace. You stop searching for spiritual identity. You no longer need titles or labels. You don't argue over beliefs. You let truth evolve. There's nothing left to prove. Your ego softens, not because it's been defeated, but because it's been integrated. You live from soul, not persona. This creates a vibration that others feel. Without effort, people find peace in your presence. They may not know why, but your calm opens something in them. That's the frequency of a nearly completed soul. It doesn't instruct, it transmits. You also stop fearing time. You don't rush. You don't cling. You move with the seasons of your spirit, trusting each unfolding. Even the unknown stops feeling threatening. It begins to feel sacred. Because when the soul nears completion, all things are welcome, even silence. Estella reminds us that this kind of stillness isn't practiced, it's remembered. It rises when the soul is no longer reacting to life, but holding it like a lantern. And in that stillness, the soul doesn't fade, it arrives. Emotional triggers don't pull you in like before. In previous incarnations, emotions could feel like tidal waves, overpowering, reactive, and inescapable. But when your soul nears completion, something changes. The triggers that once hooked you begin to lose their grip. You still feel emotion, but it doesn't consume you. You observe it instead of becoming it. This is the maturity of a soul that has outgrown its emotional loops. You might notice that situations which once caused anger or sadness now bring clarity instead. You pause before reacting. You breathe through tension. You no longer spiral into blame or self-pity. Not because you're numb, but because your soul remembers the cycle and chooses peace over repetition. Emotional triggers become teachers, not traps. This shift isn't forced. It's natural. The pain no longer sticks because your identity no longer clings. You don't need to be right, seen, or defended in the same way. The ego relaxes. You allow others their journey without needing to correct them. You move inward, not to retreat, but to preserve your center. That centeredness becomes your home. This evolution is one of the strongest signs that you're in your final life cycle. You're no longer here to learn through reaction. You're here to live through presence. And every time you stay grounded when the old patterns try to rise, your soul confirms it. You've done this before, and now you're mastering the exit with grace. You see through systems without becoming bitter. As your soul nears the end of its earthly journey, the illusions of society begin to unravel before your eyes. You see the constructed nature of politics, institutions, trends, and even certain spiritual teachings. But unlike in previous lives, where disillusionment might have led to anger or cynicism, now you see through the systems without bitterness. You're not shocked anymore. You're awake, and you've learned how to observe without collapse. You may notice how the world tries to package truth in layers of noise, control, or performance. And while others argue or fight against it, you begin to withdraw from the drama. Not out of avoidance, but from wisdom. You understand that fighting the illusion sustains it. So you step into neutrality, not disengaged, but unentangled. This neutrality holds enormous power, the kind that doesn't oppose systems, it outgrows them. This clarity allows you to live differently. You don't blindly follow, but you don't waste energy resisting either. You walk through life like a lucid dreamer, fully present, fully aware, and no longer deceived. You interact with the world from a space of sovereignty, choosing carefully what you invest in, while keeping your essence intact. That kind of discernment only arises after many lifetimes of entanglement. And most importantly, your clarity doesn't become a weapon. It becomes a light. You don't use your insight to shame others. You offer compassion because you've been there. You've believed the illusions, lived inside them, fought for them. Now, having stepped beyond them, you hold space, not to dominate, but to guide by quiet example. This balance of vision and peace is a rare frequency, and it's a mark of a soul that's no longer bound to the game. It's finishing the dream awake. The need to prove anything has faded. One of the clearest signs your soul is nearing its final cycle is the quiet disappearance of the need to prove anything. You no longer chase validation, not from family, friends, the world, or even your own mind. The urge to explain yourself, to justify your existence, to be seen as enough, begins to dissolve. What replaces it is not apathy, but a deep inner peace. In this space, success isn't measured by how much you do, but by how aligned you are while doing it. You act because your soul moves, not because you need applause. You speak because there's truth, not because you want attention. There's a quiet power in that, and it resonates more deeply than anything you've ever tried to prove. You also stop taking things personally. Criticism doesn't shake you the way it once did. Praise doesn't intoxicate you either. Both pass through you like wind through a window. Your worth is no longer something you measure. It's something you remember. That memory softens your presence. It makes you walk gently, but stand tall. This shift doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you grow differently. You don't push. You don't perform. You simply become. And in becoming, you radiate something others can feel, but rarely describe. That frequency is unmistakable. It's the vibration of a soul no longer trying to prove anything, just here to complete its final expressions in peace. You experience time in a non-linear way. Time feels different when your soul has lived many lives. In your final incarnation, the structure of time begins to bend. Hours stretch. Days blur. Moments carry weight far beyond the clock. You may have days that feel like lifetimes and memories that seem to echo from futures not yet lived. This is not confusion. It's soul perception emerging through the cracks in time. You might find that past, present, and future no longer feel like separate threads. Instead, they weave together in dreams, thoughts, and experiences that seem strangely familiar. You understand people you just met. You anticipate events before they happen. You feel like you've already been here, not in this moment, but in its vibration. This isn't just intuition, it's timeline wisdom. Your soul, approaching the end of its earthly cycle, is no longer anchored to linearity. It's beginning to see in spirals, not straight lines. The veil thins. Time loosens. And what once felt fixed becomes fluid. You're not losing your mind. You're shifting into the soul's broader vantage point. This new relationship with time makes you live differently. You savor more. You rush less. You understand that urgency is a construct and patience is a portal. And in this expansive sense of time, you begin to taste something rare. The awareness that you've almost completed the mission. There is no race left, only remembering. You feel called to teach, but without attachment. When a soul nears the end of its earthly journey, it often feels a pull to share what it knows. But this time, it's different. You don't teach to be heard. You don't teach to be followed. You feel called to share, not to build a platform, but to leave a frequency behind for others who are still awakening. This kind of teaching isn't loud. It's not attached to form or fame. You might find yourself quietly guiding a friend, leaving messages in your art, or simply living in a way that makes others feel safer in their own truth. You become a mirror, not a megaphone. And your wisdom doesn't demand attention. It invites remembrance. You might even hesitate at first. You don't want the ego to interfere. That's because your soul knows that teaching in this life is not about being the expert. It's about passing the torch. You're not here to accumulate followers. You're here to leave energy signatures that ripple through time, long after you're gone. This is how souls complete their work, not through grand declarations, but through humble embodiment. You become a lighthouse that shines quietly, consistently, without expectation. And those who are meant to find you will, without effort. Because you're not here to convince anymore. You're here to transmit. Worldly success no longer feeds you. There comes a moment when material success, no matter how grand, begins to feel hollow. Not because it's wrong, but because it's no longer yours. You can still admire beauty, celebrate abundance, and enjoy ease. But if you're in your last life, these things don't define your joy anymore. They become background music, not the melody. You may have achieved things that once mattered deeply. Status, recognition, financial security. But now there's a soft emptiness behind them, a knowing that none of it lasts. And more importantly, none of it touches the eternal part of you. That realization doesn't create depression, it creates liberation. Your soul starts craving meaning over milestones, stillness over noise, simplicity over expansion. You begin to value depth in relationships, truth in communication, and alignment in every action. The external no longer motivates you. The internal harmony does. You work, but from presence. You serve, but without striving. This shift can be confusing at first. The world may not understand why you're no longer chasing. But deep down, you know you're no longer here to climb ladders. You're here to dismantle the illusion that you ever needed one. Because the soul that is complete doesn't build kingdoms. It builds peace. You feel at home in multiple cultures and none. As your soul nears its final earthly incarnation, you might feel strangely at home everywhere, and yet not fully belonging anywhere. This is because you've lived many lives across different lands, languages, and lineages. Your soul carries echoes of them all, so your current life doesn't anchor you in one identity. It stretches across many. You may feel deeply connected to cultures you were never born into. You understand rituals, values, or symbols that feel like memory rather than discovery. This isn't appropriation, it's reincarnational remembrance. Your soul is weaving together pieces of its many homes before it returns to the ultimate one, Source. This wide resonance also creates a sense of disconnection. While others find comfort in national identity or tribal belonging, you float just outside of those lines. You respect them deeply, but your sense of home is internal now. You're no longer rooted in geography. You're rooted in frequency. This doesn't make you lost. It makes you free. Because when your soul has touched so many lands, it no longer clings to any one flag. It carries Earth as memory and cosmos as origin. And in that space, you don't need to belong. You simply hold space for all of it to belong within you. The concept of death brings peace, not fear. As the soul matures across lifetimes, the fear of death begins to dissolve. When you're in your final incarnation, you don't resist death. You understand it. You no longer see it as a punishment or an end, but as a return. A soft homecoming. You carry a quiet reverence for the closing of life, not panic. The terror that once haunted you in previous lives is replaced with inner peace. This doesn't mean you wish for death. It means you no longer resist the mystery of it. You feel its presence as a natural part of life, not an interruption. When others speak of endings, you remain calm, not because you're indifferent, but because you've seen beyond the veil. You've crossed it before, and something in you remembers what waiting beyond it feels like. Your relationship with time, legacy, and urgency shifts as a result. You stop measuring your life in terms of what you can accumulate. You begin measuring it in how deeply you feel, how honestly you speak, how courageously you love. You want each moment to matter, not in grandeur, but in truth. That's what a soul nearing completion values most: authenticity over achievement. You may find comfort in quiet thoughts about the afterlife, not as a doctrine, but as a felt sense. A knowing that whatever comes next will meet you gently, because your soul isn't afraid of death anymore. It's familiar with it, and that familiarity brings a peace that is both powerful and rare, a peace that whispers, "You are almost home." You're letting go of even your spiritual identity. At earlier stages of the soul's journey, discovering spirituality can feel like a powerful awakening. You wear it proudly, seek out knowledge, align with titles: healer, empath, lightworker, seeker. But when your soul nears its final life, even these spiritual identities begin to dissolve, not from loss, but from evolution. You no longer need a label to know who you are. There's a quiet shedding that begins. You realize that even the most sacred practices, when clung to, can become attachments. You begin moving from essence, not expression. Meditation becomes presence, not performance. Prayer becomes breath. You stop searching for the right way to be spiritual. You simply are. You might feel a disinterest in debates over paths, rituals, or beliefs. You hold space for many truths without needing to defend one. You realize that God, Source, the divine, it lives not in words, but in your awareness itself. And in that realization, you stop needing identity. You become the field that identity dissolves into. The inner child is no longer wounded. It's wise. In early life cycles, the inner child often carries wounds: abandonment, rejection, unworthiness. But when you're living your final life, something beautiful begins to shift. You no longer view your inner child as broken or in need of fixing. Instead, you start to recognize its wisdom. That child within becomes a guide, not a fragment to heal, but a voice of truth you finally trust. You notice that the fear once buried in your childhood memories begins to feel less personal. You can witness the pain without reliving it. The emotional charge softens. The narratives dissolve. And what remains is the essence of that child's purity, curiosity, innocence, and love that never died, only got buried beneath survival. Instead of managing your inner child, you begin playing with them. Instead of guarding them, you begin listening to them. You no longer feel ashamed of vulnerability or softness. You celebrate them. That child's laughter becomes sacred. Their questions become intuitive guidance. You no longer silence the child inside. You walk with them. This integration is rare. It marks a soul that has moved from fragmentation to wholeness. You don't just remember who you are, you remember who you've always been. And in your last incarnation, that inner child no longer asks for protection. They offer it. Because they never forgot what you had to unlearn. Your dreams reveal cross-lifetime echoes. Dreams become different in the final life cycle. They stretch beyond the symbolic, beyond the personal subconscious. They begin carrying echoes from other incarnations, faces you've never seen in this life but feel connected to, locations you've never visited but recognize with certainty. These aren't dreams, they are remembrances. You may wake up with a feeling that lingers all day, even though the details of the dream fade. That feeling is a thread from another time, pulling you gently back toward the whole of your soul. Sometimes dreams become teachings. Other times they're reunions, but they always feel bigger than you. What once seemed like fantasy now feels like frequency. You might dream in languages you don't speak. You might see yourself in other bodies, living lives that feel more familiar than your current one.